Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Skull Session Recruiting Podcast brought to you by BuckeyeHuddle.com. I'm Marc Givler. Got Kevin Noon here with me today. February is a dead month, so no recruiting visits. Coaches are off the road. Focus on winter workouts, all that stuff. But February also kind of marks the start of camp season, which runs all the way through really the end of June, beginning of July. So there's already some big national camps already. We were at one this past week, or I was at one this past week in Orlando at the Under Armour camp, and you can watch the Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning episode where we talk about that. Should be up here pretty soon if you want to get a little bit of a recap from that. But first, some big news on the coaching staff that I think will have some carryover to recruiting we're going to get into. Ohio State finalized its coaching staff yesterday, essentially, barring anything crazy. James Laurinaitis receives his promotion, his kind of long-anticipated promotion as a GA to a full-time linebackers coach. Larry Johnson signs a extension, or is now signed through 2025 season. Tim Walton signs an extension through the 2026 season. Keenan Bailey extended through the 2025 season. So a lot of guys are obviously under contract long-term now. I believe Chip Kelly's deal was a 3-year deal as offensive coordinator. So, things can happen. Guys can leave for promotions, things like that. But it sounds like they've taken a lot of the guesswork out of contract situations here the last week or so. So, first of all, just Kevin, as a whole, this has to answer some questions for recruits. This has to at least give Ohio State some clarity now to push forward at all positions in 25 and 26.
Yeah, I mean, clarity is right because we weren't even sure what the 10th coach was going to be. Was it going to be a special teams coordinator? Was it going to be a defensive line coach? Was it going to be a linebackers coach? We now know what the 10-man coaching roster looks like. We now have more years on certain coaches. So there's some longevity there. Larry Johnson getting a couple of years. Will it put to rest all of the retirement rumors and everything else? No, because you're recruiting class of 2025 and he's only signed through 2025. So I'm sure programs out there are still going to be like, well, it doesn't really matter. He's not going to be there all that long anyway. But it shows the direction that Ohio State is going in. This is, there is a long game in play, and recruits thrive on stability. Recruiting thrives on stability, and Ohio State has created some stability, and I think that that's very important.
Yeah, I think it's important this cycle. Let's start with Larry Johnson. Larry Johnson's been rumored to retire for, 7 or 8 years now. Basically the entire time I've been covering it, it feels like schools have used his retirement against him. He still hasn't retired. Seems to have a lot of energy. We'll see, but I think this helps in the sense that, the best thing for D-line recruiting probably would have been to do a D-line coach in waiting type of deal. But obviously James Laurinaitis is kind of viewed as like a rising recruiting star right now. How long is he going to be a GA? Like how long is he going to, there's some NFL teams we're kind of poking around. Other schools certainly poking around. So I think the urgency there to get him wrapped up was being felt. So if you don't do the D-line coach and waiting thing, or you can't get the right guy for that, I think the next best thing was to extend Larry Johnson out past this coming season, because now recruits who will be signing in December now know, hey, Larry Johnson's under contract, through the 2025 season. So that's my freshman year. So I'm not going to sign in December and then he's going to retire a week later. I think that puts some things to bed there. I think it helps them in terms of, okay, this is when we know he signed through. So let's have these conversations a little earlier this year about, do we need a D-line coach in waiting for 2025, or how are we going to do that? So it kind of buys them some time there, allows them to kind of get their feet under them with that maneuver. I still think Jim Knowles has to be a little bit more involved with the defensive line recruiting. Maybe not so much linebackers now. I mean, still maybe somewhat because he loves that coaching that position, but you have Laurinaitis now. There's no reason to think he's going anywhere. You have Tim Walton locked in. He's obviously doing a great job with the secondary. You've got help there. You have 2 secondary coaches essentially. But the thing that's kind of bit them a little bit in the past is Larry Johnson, much like Brian Hartline on offense, has sort of dominated his position recruiting, and kind of it's, they call it Larry land. It's kind of been his own little world. And I think Jim Knowles, if they want to have a smooth transition, whether that's in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, whatever that's going to be, I think Jim Knowles has to get a little more involved, or someone does. And to me, Knowles makes the most sense with the defensive line recruiting, so that these decisions these defensive linemen are making aren't just like 100% based on relationships with Larry Johnson.
Yeah, that's the problem with being called the GOAT in Larry's case is, that's your guy. And if he's gone, then what? But, to get back to an earlier point you made and then to kind of build off of it. Yeah, it was very important, to extend Larry out 2 seasons through 25 if you were not going to get that replacement in, because it's too much to ask somebody to come in who's presumably a D-line coach already, and it's like, okay, well, you're going to be a very well taken care of analyst for 2 years, and you're going to have to kind of ride this through or whatever. Now you can get to the end of 24 and see where things stand at that point. But then again, you sit there and you look at what the roster is, of coaches, and I don't know necessarily who would be moving on to be able to facilitate having 2 on the defensive line. So, stay tuned for that. But as for Jim and his recruiting, I think that having Jim kind of tag teaming some of the D-line recruiting is important, because it gets familiarity with Jim. I don't necessarily know Jim's recruiting style per se, but I go back to some guys that were tremendous coaches and maybe not the best recruiters. And Ed Warner comes to mind, and Ed Warner's players would run through a brick wall for him. But if you were a recruit who didn't know him, I thought it was a little weird. So, I think that Jim, I don't think anybody thinks he's weird. I mean, maybe the amount of coffee he drinks, maybe the fact that he's an Eagles fan is a little weird. It's weird to me, but outside of that, you build that rapport, and I think you protect yourself a little bit more with these guys. Jim will be able to be like, this is kind of what I see regardless, because whether or not you buy into, Jim maybe wanting more of a 3-4 and Larry being a 4-3 guy or whatever, that's ultimately where maybe some disconnect could be. And I think that having Jim Knowles involved in the process could clear some of that up.
Yeah, and I think they've done a good job on some of these guys. Like Justin Hill, for example, from Winton Woods, is an edge player, but he's they're talking about the jack position with him and utilizing that more with him. He was really built in a lab to play that position, and they've had James Laurinaitis involved in that recruiting process, so it hasn't just been Larry Johnson. They've had, I think, Jim Knowles as well involved there. So I think they are doing that. I don't think they have. I don't think we're telling them something they don't know right now. I think they are understanding that this needs to be a little bit more of a group effort with defensive line recruiting, so you're not having to combat these retirement rumors every year, and you're not just having every kid's decision based solely on their comfortability with Larry Johnson being there long term. I think you just have to have some other voices involved in these recruiting processes, and I think they are doing that with some of these kids. So that's a good sign. Most deserved, the Tim Walton extension, promotion, title addition, whatever you want to call it. Super important. You're recruiting these 5-star kids from out of state. You want to lock up the Walton as much as possible, as much as you possibly can. You can't really lock up assistants the way you can lock up head coaches, but you want to have some type of long-term deal in place there, which they now have. He's got 3 years left now on his contract. he's been an absolute star recruiter. Certainly he's done a great job with the corners as well. It's been a real reemergence of the cornerback position at Ohio State. So I thought that was important too. I know it was very well received. Devin Sanchez, his family, obviously very well received. That's, you're going to have to hold on for dear life with Naheem Offord, in my opinion, but that certainly doesn't hurt you in that regard. That's a big relationship there. He's off to a really good start in 26. Guys like Elbert Hill in State, some kids in Florida that we're going to be talking about here pretty soon that he's in good with already. So that was important, I think, to me, just because, again, he's blossoming into that kind of, we keep talking about the heart line of the defense type of thing. And what do the receivers always want to know when they commit to Ohio State or when they sign with Ohio State? As long as is Coach Hartline going to be there? So we get it. We're getting into the same thing with Larry Johnson, Brian Hartline, but the same thing kind of applies again with Walton. Is you want to know he's under contract, he's being taken care of.
Right, exactly. And you're right. You can't lock up assistants, and truthfully, you could sign him to a 10-year deal. And if a head coaching position comes along and he's interested in it, he's going to get out of the deal. These contracts are all well and good and protect you to a certain extent, but that's where it stops. So having that type of longevity will help with the recruiting. Certainly success begets success, and the safeties played very well last year, and expectations are sky high. Ohio State goes into the portal and gets Caleb Downs. I think that the product this year is going to be, even better, and that'll just, help continue in maintaining your 25 class, moving ahead into 26 and beyond. It shows, I think, a lot of a change of how Ohio State goes about doing things. We like 1-year deals or whatever. That gives you a lot of freedom of movement to be able to not get locked into quote unquote a bad deal or anything like that. But, Ohio State may not be the first program out there to adopt something new, but once Ohio State puts its mind to it, then it does a good job with that. And I think that that's very important. Of course, people are going to be like, well, why haven't we heard anything about Tony Alford or whatever? And it's like, well, I don't know how many years are left on everybody's deals. I don't have that, I don't always have that in front of me. But, these are moves that are being made over and above. You don't have to sit there and make 10 moves at a time. That's just not necessarily what it is. It just really kind of seemed to be an information dump. And, maybe Gene just making sure that he just is kind of taking care of everybody before he leaves.
And one player in particular I was thinking about as Walton got that promotion extension is Fahim Delane, 5-star safety, number 1 safety in the country. If you're on the board, that Ohio State's kind of been my pick for Fahim for a little bit now. And they lose Perry Eliano, or they part ways with Perry Eliano, however you want to look at it. And I know that was kind of like whoa, what's going on? It's kind of like you kind of take a step back if you're Fahim, and that's kind of been one of your main recruiters. But now, Tim Walton's locked in. Matt Guerrieri's done a really good job stepping in. That was like the first kid he was like all over when he came back, got the safeties job. So those two have kind of, clicked pretty much right away. And so I kind of reported that a couple weeks ago. So everything to me is in good spot here now for Fahim Delane. Oregon, obviously up there, a lot of, LSU, other national school. He's a national kid, but it certainly feels like Ohio State has continued to pick up momentum.
Yeah. Ohio State continues to push hard there. You've got the members of the class that are pushing Fahim as well. Devin Sanchez, maybe he's not as much of the recruiter as his parents are. His parents are, talk about the breakthrough. They're on it. Anybody that seems to be on the board, on the recruiting board, they're going after. But yeah, it's kind of crazy how it's all kind of coming together for Ohio State. And, this is looking like a Brian Hartline receiver type of class if Ohio State's able to get Fahim Delane, and then you still have guys like Trey McNutt and Dorian Brew and at just what point, how deep can they go? And who ends up being odd man out and everything else there. But when it comes to Fahim Delane, there's some debates whether or not he's going to want to take some officials before he commits, or does he just end it sooner rather than later? But the message is coming in strong.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do there. Here's what I think is going to happen. So they will definitely take 6. I think they would take 7. Like if Fahim Delane, Trey McNutt, Dorian Brew, Cody Haddad wanted to flip from Wisconsin, I don't think they would turn any of those guys away, and I think they would just take 7 and figure it out later. But what's going to happen here, and this is what I say all the time with the receivers, because everyone always starts off the cycle and says, well, Brian Hartline's going to land like 4 5-star receivers or 4 of the top, 6 or 7 receivers in the country. And I always have to come in and say, Brian Hartline's probably the best recruiter in the country from an assistant coach perspective. But eventually, once you get 2 or 3 of those guys, the 4th and 5th guys are going to look at that and be like, yeah, I could go be a part of this room, but I'm one of 4 or 5 stars at my position in this class. How many balls am I going to catch my first 2 years on campus? Why don't I go be the top guy for another top 10 program somewhere else? And that's kind of what I'm waiting to see in the secondary this year. Is what I think is going to dictate the number isn't necessarily Ohio State's willingness to take all these guys. I think it's eventually that once you get number 4, number 5, it's okay, do the 6th and 7th guys you still want to take, are they going to look at that and be like, okay, it would be fun, but this is kind of nuts. I'm going to be the 6th guy in this class, and I'm the top guy on Texas or Alabama or, Penn State's board. Do I really, is this the best situation, both from a playing time perspective and from an NIL perspective? You have to think about that too. There's only so much NIL money for a 5-star corner. If you're the 3rd 5-star corner, are you going to get the same type of NIL package that you could get at another big program where you're the top ranked corner coming into the program? So these are the things right now, everything looks good for the guys that are recruiting, but eventually it just feels like maybe someone looks at this and says, not for me, good luck, and that's going to be the interesting thing for me.
Well, and I think it depends on each individual. Trey McNutt is a little bit of a different story than everybody else. The son of Richard McNutt, former Buckeye, lives in Ohio. Certainly has Ohio ties. He is an in-state kid. Dorian Brew now lives in Conroe, Texas, but came out of Ohio. How does he view things? I think everybody's situation is going to be a little different of what their tolerance will be for competition. But the reality is that Ohio State is going to have a great opportunity for people to step into roles coming out of this season with, guys that will be playing in their final season. And that's not to take anything away from Jermaine Matthews and Malik Hartford and guys like that. Heck, we're not even talking really about Calvin Simpson-Hunt yet at this point. But there will be jobs that will not have an incumbent coming in. So I think that it's going to be a lot easier to load up here in the class of 25 than it would be to load up in the class of 26, when you got to figure that a lot more young guys are going to be stepping into roles to hold those positions down for 2 years or whatever before they move on.
Yeah, the portal really did them a favor at safety because they lost a lot of bodies. So it's easier to sell these recruits now on getting into the 2 deep pretty early. And then the guy who you bring in Caleb Downs, we all know he's a 3 and done. We know he's not coming back after the 2025 season. He will be in the NFL. So you have a very clear kind of path right now at safety, especially, that you can sell guys on. And then you look at corner and it's look, Jordan Hancock, Denzel Burke, Davis Ngwanosa, they could all be gone after this year, and they may all be very highly drafted players. And then you're going to bring back Jermaine Matthews. You're going to bring back Calvin Simpson-Hunt. But that's only 2 guys. You still have that nickel spot. And, maybe not for Calvin Simpson-Hunt. We'll see how it goes this year for him, see how many snaps he gets. Someone like Jermaine Matthews is probably, looking as, kind of getting a bigger piece of the pie this year and then having his money year 3 and then off to the NFL. I mean, that's certainly a possibility there. So I think you can sell, like you said, I think you can sell the depth chart pretty well right now, but so it'll just be, it's a case by case thing. I tell us to our board all the time. It's like, I can tell you they lead for 6 kids in the secondary, but what I can't tell you right now is how kid number 5 and number 6 are going to react after the first 4 commit. I can't tell you that. I don't know that. And I can't know what the kids don't know. The kids don't even know how they're fully going to react to that yet until it happens and they have to react to it. So that's the thing I think to watch with the secondary recruiting. But it's like it's first world problems. I mean, they're in on so many top 5-star, top 50 caliber players right now that, regardless of what happens, if there's a surprise to the good or surprise to the bad, they're going to sign probably the best secondary class in the country, certainly one of the top 2 or 3. So maybe the best in Ohio State history when the dust settles. We'll see how everything goes.
Against the Okuda, Wade, getting Kendall Sheffield in the portal that year. I mean, that's, kind of the benchmark class. I wrote a story for Buckeye Huddle about that 2 weeks ago, something like that. And, that in the recruiting service era, which goes back to 2002, that was by far the best secondary class that I could find.
Yep. I think it's going to be that level at corner, and then you're going to have better safeties in that class this year. I think that's going to be the difference. But yeah, amazing class, and this one was reminding me of it. So we talked about the Walton extension. We talked about Larry Johnson. Chip Kelly, another, again, so you would think if he left a head coaching job to come be the offensive coordinator here, we're not going to have a Bill O'Brien situation or anything. So Chip Kelly is going to take over the offense. Ross Fulton's talked about the fit. You can go check out that stuff on our YouTube channel or on the messageable premium board at BuckeyeHuddle.com and get all of Ross's stuff on that. The recruiting impact to me is interesting. Chip was not considered an elite recruiter as a head coach. Now he is considered very good at taking whatever talent he gets and building his offense around that talent, particularly at the quarterback position. Kind of, they've had teams that were very quarterback driven in the run game. They've had teams that weren't so quarterback driven in the run game, where it was more the running backs drove it. So he can be versatile. I wonder, and this will be the interesting thing for me to watch here the next year is I think he clearly despised the off the field sort of responsibilities that a college football head coach has in today's era. I don't think he's against NIL. I don't think that's the stance. I don't think it's like, well, I don't think the player should get money. I don't think that's it. I think he hated having to kind of dance for the boosters and kind of, show up and do these fundraising things. And he doesn't really have to do that anymore. He doesn't have to do the NIL conversations. That's Ryan Day's problem. There are so many things now that he doesn't have to do anymore. And he's going to be at a place, I think it offers a lot more support to the football program at Ohio State. That kind of takes some of that off the plate as well. And so with that being said, and with him having a very limited recruiting pool he needs to worry about, because Ryan Day is going to help him with the quarterbacks. Hartline's got the receivers. Justin Fry's doing the O-line and Tony Alford's doing the running backs. It feels like if you just sit Chip down and tell him hey, let's talk about who our top 5 or 6 quarterbacks are, and let's just worry about recruiting those guys, that could be a good kind of compromise here.
Right. He's going to be able to show his track record. He's going to be able to show, his stops. I mean, obviously what he did at Oregon and then, to what he did at UCLA, where Dorian Thompson-Robinson was somebody different than whoever else. You get him into a position where he focuses on a couple of players and can have real conversations with them. This is what I see that I think that we'll be able to do with you, and so on and so forth. And don't sink the ship while you're at it. I think that's going to be fine. Yeah, he's going to have a lot less to do in terms of some of that ancillary head coach stuff. But I mean, he's going to have to get on the road and do the recruiting. And it's good that Ohio State already has a 25 quarterback commit in Tavian St. Clair, and he's not all that far away. So he's not going to have to screw around with a lot of travel concerns. I mean, he'll just have to go to Bell Fountain and go see his guy there and everything else. And then whether or not they go after Jared Curtis in 26 or Will Griffin or whoever it may be, I mean, you kind of go there. But I mean, I think that it is such an exciting move. I was just thinking about it. I think today is really the first day I had a chance to sit back and think about it, not having to think about Chris Holtman and the basketball team, not having to think about this. And I'm just like, if he's able, he's going to have the kind of talent that he had at Oregon. I mean, the offenses aren't necessarily going to be a carbon copy of one another, but he's going to have that kind of talent. Just how scary could that be? Oh, by the way, this defense, if it continues, I mean, even if it only gets 20% better than what it was last year, and I think that from 22 from 21, that the defense, or I guess 23 from 22, that the defense made a gigantic leap. I mean, this is going to be a hard team to hang with.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a tough sell for him. And again, I just think you sit him down and say, look, here's the 2026 quarterback targets we've been looking at. Who do you like out of this group? Like, is there anyone you don't particularly like that we've been tracking? Is there anyone we haven't been tracking you want us to take more of a look at? And you just have those conversations. You just turn them loose on like the top 5 guys. And, Jared Curtis will definitely be one of them. I assume Will Griffin will be another one. They're looking at Noah Grubbs right now in Florida as well. That's a guy who's blown up. They've got some work to do there because they've got some catch up to do there because he hasn't been offered yet, and he's got a bunch of big offers. But those are some of the guys they're looking at right now. They all spoke from ranging. They were all positive. Like Will Griffin was very, very excited about getting up here to meet Chip Kelly this spring. Jared Curtis, SEC guy, grew up in Tennessee, big SEC guy. He's more of I know of him. I haven't talked to him as a recruit yet. But I'm really, I know of him, and I'm looking forward to meeting him as well. And, I know Noah Grubbs was pretty excited about it too. So he's got a good reputation with quarterbacks. And so I think this will be a good fit from that perspective. And you also have obviously Ryan Day's reputation with quarterbacks. So I think it's going to be really strong for them with quarterback recruiting. Jared Curtis, as a quick aside, has backed off his I'm going to commit really soon thing. He's going to come back up to Ohio State in the spring. I think it's a huge win for Ohio State. They didn't get wrapped up into things and like commit to Georgia in the last couple of weeks. I think that opens that thing right back wide open again for them. So it'll be interesting to follow that. And then, the last thing I want to get into, James Laurinaitis, of course, mentioned earlier, got the full-time promotion. I wrote a story on BuckeyeHuddle.com that you can read. Just talked to TJ Alford, Elijah Melendez, arguably their 2 top linebacker targets, certainly 2 of their top 3 or 4 linebacker targets right now in the country. Both of them were thrilled about Laurinaitis getting the promotion. Alford, who decides right here at the end of March. I mean, this is coming up on 6-7 weeks the most. He's going to decide. And I asked him hey, was this something that was in the back of your mind? Laurinaitis' future? Was he going to be there? Was he going to be the linebackers coach? Was he going to be a GA? What kind of, did his role at Ohio State or him being there at all, was that going to be a big factor in your decision? He said, absolutely. He said, if I go to Ohio State, I want him to be there. And so I think if you lose Laurinaitis this month, I don't know that you get Alford at the end of March. And maybe you still don't. I like where they stand personally, but it felt like that might have been a bad time to lose James Laurinaitis.
Yeah, I mean, it would have really been a bad time. Everybody's like, well, it's only March. Well, but recruiting calendar is so sped up, and March used to be, I mean, schools would have 2 or 3 commits at that point. Not anymore. I mean, so if you would have to kind of start all over with an unknown quantity, somebody that had not talked to TJ Alford, not talked to Elijah Melendez. I know that he's Menendez, that he's already committed somewhere, but that's not going to stop Ohio State from staying in there. You lose a lot of ground, and you could lose the kid. So it is a big win there. I like where Ohio State stands too. But we'll we'll see. I'll put in right now to go down to Vero Beach and spend some time down there when he makes his announcement, but I don't want to drive.
Yeah, we'll have to figure that out. But so Alford's got a visit a week before he commits, or the week before he decides, makes a commitment. He's got a visit to Ohio State. So they will very likely get the last crack at him. So not having to have him come up there and explain to him who the new linebackers coach is, I think is very helpful in this one. And Elijah Melendez is committed to Miami, as you mentioned. But he also told me he plans to get up to Ohio State in the spring. And he's been very kind of clear that while committed to Miami, he is not going to forego the opportunity to take visits. So that one is very much still up in the air. So that was, I think, very important news there. As we mentioned kind of at the top of the show, camp season has started. I think kind of like the Under Armour Orlando camp last week kicked it off again. Buckeyes tomorrow morning feed. Tom Moore and I will have something on that here shortly. And if you're getting antsy about it, then just go over to the website. I've got a ton of articles and information from that camp on BuckeyeHuddle.com. But that kind of kicked everything off. Kevin, you and I are going to have quite a trip this weekend. We're going to drive down to Atlanta for Sunday's Atlanta Under Armour camp. And then we are going to get out of there as quickly as possible so that we can get all the way to Indianapolis for Monday's Best of the Midwest, which is an annual tradition of ours to do the Best of the Midwest Combine in Indianapolis. That's always a great event. Usually a lot of kids from Ohio, Indiana, and Michigan and Illinois there. So we will have tons of camp coverage here coming up starting Sunday. So make sure you check us out there. But Kevin, just how much are you looking forward to driving from Columbus to Atlanta to Indianapolis back to Columbus in 2 days?
I'm not at all. And just because it is Best of the Midwest weekend, I mean, we do have snow moving into the area as well, because why wouldn't we? So, yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to covering the events. They're different events in certain ways of how, what you can shoot and what you can do and everything else. But, it looks like a pretty nice list for the Under Armour camp. I have my notes on the other computer, so I don't have them in front of me. And then I've started talking with the guy who puts on the Best of Midwest, and I don't have a list yet. I'm like, dude, I need a list because I'm going to have to be printing this up at a Hilton Garden Inn or something like that. He's like, I'm working on it. But all sorts of great coverage coming up here at Buckeye Huddle. And of course, we will talk about it as well at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. But be sure to sign up for Buckeye Huddle because we do keep a lot of stuff over there just exclusively for the members.
Yep. A lot of our inside information we get from these events, we keep over there. Because it's not just the interviews we do afterwards. We get to talk to coaches and parents, and we get all sorts of good stuff off the record at these events. Big part of why we do them. So we usually house all that good stuff over on BuckeyeHuddle.com. Glenville crew is supposed to be Best in the Midwest, so we'll get a look at the next wave of Glenville kids. Sincere Johnson, 2026 linebacker, I think is probably the next Ohio State caliber guy, but they always seem to come up with some more guys we don't know about yet. So we'll see what they've got there coming back, coming off a back-to-back state championships. Hoping some of the top Indiana guys are there. Have kind of been told that by a couple of them that they expect to be there. So we'll see. Won't put them on the spot just yet. So you'll have to check us out there on Sunday, Monday, see what we've got cooking there. But looking forward to it. Camp season's upon us. I'm going to be on the road here a lot the next couple months, bringing all that information. Hopefully Kevin will be able to join me on a few of these trips like he is this weekend. And hopefully you guys are enjoying our recruiting coverage over on the website. So I think that's about it for this week's episode. We will have reaction shows coming. Like I said, we'll do the inside information and all that stuff on the website, but Kevin and I will shoot little reaction podcasts after the events this weekend. So check those out here on youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle or on your podcast platform of choice. But we appreciate everyone watching and listening, and we will catch you next time.